Hey everyone, it's Teresa for the Knit Petite project, and this week's post begins our look at what the knitting world can learn from the world of sewing. So my goal for the next few posts for the rest of July are to look at just that, what the sewing world has to say to knitters. And I know that when I first started knitting, I didn't sew, I didn't know anything about sewing, and so when I started looking into learning about fitting for petites, because I was interested in it even back then, I was really frustrated because all the stuff I ever found was for people who sewed, and I thought that it had a lot of terms that I didn't understand, and I thought it ended up sort of being useless. And what I took from that was that both that petite fit issues didn't exist in knitting, which we've come to discover isn't actually the case, and that that sewing world information wasn't for me. It wasn't worth my time. I would just proceed with learning my own new craft of knitting. But what I want for July is to be a little bit of a dictionary or a conduit for the exchange of information, so that knitters who maybe don't sew, don't know anything about sewing, can at least access some sewing blogs or some very basic beginner information about sewing that actually has stuff to offer knitters. So you may have noticed so far throughout the Knit Petite project we've already been talking about knitting sources within the stuff that we've been looking at, so we've been using it already, but I also go through a few other really reputable, important sources in the knitting world that talk about sewing, and I give you sort of a brief list of sewing terms that might be new to you as a knitter or slightly different from the knitting world than they are in the sewing world. And then at the end I also talk a little bit about a bunch of different sort of gentle beginner information for knitters to learn a little bit about sewing, so that you can access those resources without knowing like everything about sewing and how it functions and how to do it, because it's really rich, it's really particular, and it's got a lot of information about fit, and particularly petite fit issues, especially compared to what the knitting world has. So I want to enable that exchange of information even if you don't sew yourself. A couple of other things in this week's post. So we have a bit of a special treat. This week we have an interview with Betsy of Skinny Bitch Curvy Chick, which is SBCC abbreviated to SBCC, and she's a pattern maker that has her own pattern line of patterns for petites, and the whole story is there on the blog, but you can see how she sort of started out doing just for petites, but then sort of grew it to petite plus, and is very interested in and keen on being particular about fit. So it was really interesting that she wanted to share. I was really excited that she wanted to share with us and share her expertise. So you can see her answer some questions for the Knit Petite project on this week's post as well. And the question for this week is, I'm asking you if you have ever accessed any sort of sewing resource to do with petite fit issues, and if so, were you able to successfully use it, or maybe was there some kind of barrier? Like, was there a term you didn't understand, or like me, did you think it was just information that was not really for you? It was almost like reading a different language. So that's the question for this week. Remember, there's the interview this week as well. A lot of it's very resource rich for this week's post, and I'm really looking forward to talking about what the sewing world has to offer us as knitters throughout the rest of July. So as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, advice, things that you think need to be in the Knit Petite project, please let me know. A very important addition to the Knit Petite project for July is a survey that we have up, and I explained a little bit in another post and another video, but essentially it's going to drive the next few months forward and push us in a few directions, possibly depending on what you have to say, what your needs are. So there's a couple of ideas for particular tools that I want to hear back from you about. So those tools are a workbook, so a print book that you can actually have in your hands, and it would guide you through modifying sweater patterns that you would purchase from somebody else, but also would contain brand new, very basic sweater designs in a bunch of different gauges and constructions, and fitted for petites, so that you're already starting out with something that is shaped slightly differently. The things that we've been talking about so far in the Knit Petite project, some of the lengths are a little bit different, so you're starting out on a footing that means you're going to have to adjust things a little bit less. So that's the workbook idea. which I'm pretty excited about. And if you're excited about it too, please let me know, because we can't move forward with that idea unless I see support for it. The other idea is a knit along, which is something that people have been voicing a little bit in other surveys, and I think would be really great to do on the Ravelry group, because the community is here, and that way we get to engage very directly with each other and help each other and be specific about a pattern that we want to knit. So you would choose whatever sweater it is that you want to knit, you would bring it to the group, and you could talk with the group, ask questions, give advice to other people, and we could work together as a community that way. So that's the survey. I want to hear back from you about those ideas, because like I said, I can't really move forward with either of them without knowing that there's some support within the Knit Petite project community for that stuff. So thanks for tuning in. You will see me every Tuesday with a new post for the Knit Petite project. Like I said, I'm very excited to get into the rest of this sewing world stuff with you throughout July, and I hope to see you throughout the rest of 2017, where we will be talking about petite fit issues for knitters. Thanks, everyone.